Welcome to the Not-for-Profit Podcast. My name is Matt Williams, your host, and today we are talking to Pastor Paul Geerling. Pastor Geerling is the senior pastor at iSEE Church in Brisbane, with campuses located throughout Brisbane and around Australia and also in India, and growing continually. Today we're talking to Pastor Paul about the three things starting up an NFP and what he sees as the biggest three things to get through that process. The first one is to seek the right advice. We talked to Pastor Paul about this. What that means in regarding to NFPs is getting advice from the right accountants, solicitors, etc., making sure you get the right advice from the right people. The second thing we cover off is not taking shortcuts. This means doing things by the book. It just allows it to be done better at the end as you go through and the not-for-profit grows. It allows you to not have to go back and change things. So if you do everything, don't take shortcuts, do everything right up the front, it's better for the not-for-profit moving forward. And the third and final thing we cover off with Paul is surrounding yourself with people who have greater strengths than you. And that's a great advice from Paul, because it's not everything we do, we can be good at everything. So surrounding yourself with people who have the strengths where you might not have a strength will ensure the NFP gets through the times that it needs that, and that allows everyone to do their job properly. Without further ado, let's get started. The Not-for-Profit Podcast is brought to you by Platinum Audits for all your auditing needs. If you need any audits done or you need any information, please contact Platinum Audits. Welcome, Mr. Paul Geerling.
How are you? Good to hear you, Matt.
Good to see you too, sir. Can you just give us a little bit of background on, what got you in the not-for-profit sector and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, when I finished high school, I was a bit lost for what to do, whether looking at joining the Air Force, and I finally got into science at Monash, and I wasn't really excited about that, Monash University. I just was a bit wasn't sure about my lifelong career. So I thought I'd do a gap year and do Bible college. I've always been involved in church and community sector. And when I was in Bible college, I really felt people area was probably more, came naturally to me. And I did 2 years of Bible college and just served like interning in quite a large church in Adelaide. And then at the end of my college graduation, I enrolled to go to Flinders University and do an arts degree in politics and Asian studies. And a part-time job came up. My pastor came and said, look, Paul, there's at the local high school, like literally half a couple of roads, looking for a chaplain. Would you consider going it? I didn't even know what a chaplain was. So that was probably my first sort of stepping into the non-for-profit sort of community-based stuff. And so it was this is like 1992 would have been a, interchurch grouping of, Lutheran Church, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, Uniting Church, Assemblies of God Church, the Pentecostal Church, had this little ministers fraternal. They raised money for a part-time wage for someone to be working as a Christian youth worker or chaplain in the school, which was a government high school. And there was a group in South Australia at the time called Schools Ministry Group, which sort of was the overarching covering group. But that was my first sort of interaction with non-for-profit, because I had to be part of the fundraising for that non-for-profit, for that chaplaincy committee.
Wow. So you would have, between 92, 93 and now, you would have seen a lot of changes in the NFP sector and across the board.
Yeah. And then I suppose I was a chaplain for 8 years, so I was involved in that. And then I when I came to Brisbane, worked at a large church in Brisbane, Garden City at the time. And we had a youth non-for-profit community care arm, which was helping young people and getting them back into school and reconciling with their families and getting jobs. And I was involved with Youth Alive, which is a national youth organisation that does a lot of stuff in schools, like bullying and seminars and self-help seminars and life choices and really helping young people make good decisions and good decision processes. And so I've been involved in all those things. Then I've been involved with other different community and charity community groups on different things around there. But there's the biggest change that I've seen, and it's been a good change, is the level of compliance and expectation that is needed. And I think it's just more that our society's got more complex, but there's a lot of great things about it, like the ACNC and all these things have been new initiatives, but it's just mean that we've all had to become a lot more organised, professional, and seek professional advice. We're probably, when I think back to 1992 on that chaplaincy committee, there was, this guy, Bruce, he was the volunteer treasurer, and someone else did this and that. It really wasn't, we really never sought professional advice. It was just, we were very much, the strength of us was a grassroots organisation doing grassroots activities and outreach and ministry and pastoral care to kids at a local high school. So that level is very strong, but there probably wasn't all the different things that we have to have on a compliance level today, which is just add a lot more administration and organisation to it, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the ACNC only come in a couple of years ago, or 5 years ago now. So have you seen from the ACNC that the level of compliance and the level of smaller organisations coming into line is better?
Well, look, the good thing about that is, I think, in my experience in the different groupings I've been involved with, is it's okay, we got to really look at how we do our back-end structures, how we're functioning, how we're working to make sure, one, we're compliant, but two, we're actually having better financial administration, better occupational health and safety, better whatever it may be, to make our organisation better. So in a sense, I don't think it's been anything to fear. It's just probably put a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on organisations to improve. And look, and all those things cost money. So I think the challenge has been for smaller groupings is, well, how do I access that skill, or how do I get that advice? Because, and so I think what I think is naturally begun to happen is groupings of ministry, of maybe smaller things, of faith-based ministry or community-orientated non-for-profits working together, conglomerating or coming under to not stop doing the function, the interface, what they're doing in community, but the back end of things, whether it's legal requirements or financial requirements or whatever it may be, working together. So it's very hard for a small organisation to pay a professional to do that. So I think it's one thing we've been seeing is a lot of, say, smaller community groups working together, or a small churches coming under a covering of a medium or large size church, because it helps with the finance, admin, and the compliance levels that are there, the level of stuff that's needed these days. And that's just, I've seen that's an evolution I've observed, Matt, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and same from my perspective, from the auditing side, we've seen that smaller churches and the campus type, multiple campuses really expand over the last sort of 3 to 5 years. Do you see that as continuing down the track? So, like, you're going to see that a lot of smaller churches becoming less and less autonomous and just becoming under the. Is it going to become more prevalent in the future?
Well, I think it's different. Like in some of the church models whereby it's more a national model when the head office has administration and does all the pays and stuff. But in the church model that I'm a part of on a Pentecostal level, or say Baptist Union, whereby the churches have their own boards, the churches do their own payrolls, and it's more a fellowship of church, a grouping of church rather than denomination. Yes, I do see that. Or small churches will have a strategic alliance with a larger church, or become a campus of a large church, or outsource to certain finance groups, maybe the running of their finances or whatever that may be. I think there's not just one method, but I think most new churches are coming, the majority of them are coming through the campus model, because a larger church has resources to do those things if they're looking for new campuses. It's not the only way, but it's definitely been happening a lot. And I think it's naturally happening because of some of those pressures.
Okay, cool. Just on that, new churches and coming onto campuses, what's the one or two things, or 2 or 3 things that you see are the utmost important things to do when you're starting up a church? Like, so you're starting up a non-profit organisation from the ground up. What's the sort of 3 main areas you see that have to, if you do it right, it sets you up for the future?
I think this is a really good thing, and is getting not being in a rush and taking the time to get the right advice. Because if you have the right advice from the beginning and set the foundation correctly on a legal level, on a financial level, on a structure level, you're building something on a good foundation. And I've also been involved in helping a lot of churches when they come up to different challenges. And part of it's been because when they started at the beginning, they took shortcuts financially. When I say nothing illegal, but more They didn't really think through their plan of what they were to do. And I remember when we started our church, one of the things which, quite often I really sought a lot of advice from pastors who'd gone before me, from the legal sector, from the financial sector, asking people how I should set this up. Now, the good thing today is there's a lot of different groupings out there in denominations. There's the ARC crew and all that stuff that really have good checklists for that. I know our denomination at the time, Australian Christian Church, had a basic checklist, which was helpful, but I think I had to even go beyond. And so I remember when I started the Bible College, and which is another sort of non-profit in our grouping of entities, and I remember talking to our lawyer, and that was an expensive conversation. Talking to lawyers is always an expensive conversation, but they said, look, if you set up this way long term, it's going to help you in the long term, but it's going to be more costly at the beginning. And we had that discussion on the board level, but I'm glad we went with the advice, because I look now 14 years down the track, and the long pathway, the more expensive pathway in setting up at the beginning has been a really, really wise decision on that level, where we could have gone a different route, which would have cost us less money, but then we would have had the 10 years down the track, change the entity again, do all the things, and it would have been more stress on the organisation and in the long term more finance. So I think seeking advice, talking to people, and I think what church planners need to know, or setting up a non-profit needs to know, is you're not the first person that's ever done this, and why make all the mistakes yourself when you can learn from others who have got some scars and been through some seasons and get some good advice off people. And I think if I look back and speak to myself in a younger age group when I was doing things, I wish I'd even asked more advice of people. Amongst there's wisdom amongst a multitude of counsellors, and I think that's really important. And it's not just I asked wisdom, I asked advice from pastors, but I'd had training at Bible College to be a pastor, but running an organisation, a non-profit, is a lot more than that. There's so much I didn't know. I remember actually talking to your father-in-law when I first took over Youth Alive, because I really was quite experienced in reading P&Ls. And I remember going to it for a couple of weeks in a row, saying this account, saying, I need you to teach me in this. Now, I think a business degree would have helped me a lot being a pastor too.
And that's something I found in my history, is that, being a part of this area, is that you do now need to have that business acumen and know what you're looking at, and know how to read about profit loss and a balance sheet, but also cash flow issues, things like that. If you could give some advice to new churches, new non-profits, what would it be in regard to cash flow? Is there one magic factor to set it up or not?
No, I just think it's building within your means, and I think also, having, when we're talking about, say, a church organisation, there's a lot of faith and optimism involved in it. So it's got to be stewardship's a mixture of wisdom and faith. You got to believe that things are going to grow, but you've got to also be wise. So I think it's surrounding yourself also with a team. Like, I'm not super strong. I'm not an accountant by background, but I've got a fair idea of what's happening in finance of the church. But then I've also strengthened the weaknesses that I have with people that do have that strength in that level, so that they're giving me the right information to make the right decision, and ultimately the board to make the right decisions. And so I think all those things, like talked before about some of the things about starting a church. Obviously, you ask the right advice, don't take shortcuts. But the third thing is surround yourself with some people that have different strengths than you have. So when you're starting a board, especially when you're starting a new church, you don't even know who's going to be in the church. So it might be some people from another church board, or that will come and give, say, 18 months just to help you get off the ground. And once you've found some people in your own church, they can come off. So you've got that strength and that wisdom. Or it might be a retired businessman, or that can help you. Who's got a bit of time. So I think you've really got to think that through, because finance is a big part of helping people. If we're doing a community-based or faith-based or non-profit that's working within the community, we want to see the goal happen. But structure, administration, faith, insurance, finance, or management, all these things are a part of that, to get to that ultimate thing of delivering effective service or ministry on the ground.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Is there anything that you've done that hasn't worked that you wish you could go back and change, or do differently, or do again? Just to help out there, just to come to terms with, okay, you're not going to make the correct decision every single time.
Well, I think you're always learning from your successes and your failures. And I think for us, I look at the way I planted the church originally. 15 years ago, I wouldn't do the same way now. I've learned a lot more. So when we're starting a new campus now, we've got a lot more preparation and planning in place, where I think I was a lot younger. I was just gung-ho, let's get this thing happening, which is all exciting, all that. But as the organisation grows, you've got to have more systems involved in that and the preparation involved in that. And I think I wish I'd actually talked to more people about what is a successful way to do things rather than just trial and error myself. I'm sort of that guy, well, I'll just get into it. Let's make this thing happen. Let's get started. But if I reckon I could have a bit more prep in, I think we could have accelerated some things in that. Look, it depends what areas. I think we've made mistakes in all areas. The big thing is learning from your mistakes and trying to go forward. As the organisation grows, it has different needs, and I think we've probably at different stages had to learn different lessons to grow to the next level.
Yeah. And in that, do you set KPIs, or how do you know you're hitting the mark of where you want to be at in that growth? The church has gone from, one campus to 2 to 3 to multiple. Is there markers that you set? Now, how do you know you're being successful? How do you know you hit the target that you set?
Well, there's cultural things that are successful. They're harder to measure, but obviously things like finance and attendance are the things that are easy to measure. And I do think finance speaks a bit about the health of the church. So I think they're different measurements. You can't, if it was a business that's selling things, it would be customer satisfaction survey. And so I think, we have in our churching cultural goals that we can indicate how we're healthy, and things go for different seasons. There may be things happen in the city that affect the church. We've got a campus in Townsville at the moment, and Townsville's doing a challenging season at the moment, which you feels it within the congregation because the nickel refinery went down. They've been waiting to see if Adani's going to go through, and there's a whole lot of things there. And I think if the jobs and the business start flowing, you actually feel that in the town and feel that the church. And sometimes they're not actually organisational things; they're environmental things of what's happening in the city, or what's happening in the state, or what's happening in the nation, economically or culturally, can also affect our organisations as well. So we've got to be not just focused, narrowly onto what we're trying to do, but to understand what's going on around us as well. In the community that we're living in.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. That's because you're a community-based, not-for-profit. You have to really have that feeling for the community and what's happening in the community, and work towards that. Because if they need more support, you have to go out and give that support.
Yeah, and I think like a classic would be when we were doing Youth Alive is that, and I've been out of Youth Alive 8 or 9 years now, so they've gone to another chapter, another journey, another direction, and they're doing great. But when I was involved in that organisation, we had a couple of evolutions where we had to change. The mission stayed the same, but had to change the way we delivered it, if that makes sense. The vision. Yep. And I remember one time we came to this point going, okay, we were doing concerts and things for young people. We really came to this point, we've got to drop the prices, because at the time, remember, it was around the GFC and families were doing it tough, and our biggest clientele was teenagers. And therefore, we've got to somehow, if we're going to keep getting towards the vision of where we want to go and what's our mission for an organisation, we had to make some changes in the way we were doing the model, the way not what we were, the goal of what we were delivering, but the way which we did it. And part of that was, for that thing, was entry prices to our big youth rallies, big youth concerts that we were doing, because we were just finding that we'd had all these seasons of prosperity in the Australian economy, and we hit some challenging times, and we were feeling that. So we had to adapt with it to keep doing the mission of what we're doing, but the method changed.
Yeah. And you mentioned before boards, and this sort of relates to that. Is that a board direction, or is that as a leader of a church, you said you rely on the board 100%, for a lot of that strategic change and stuff like that? And how much reliance do you put on the board for that? And how much do they have to champion that?
Well, I think it depends too where the organisation is at. When our church was smaller, the board had a lot more macro involvement in the running of the finances of the church. As the church has grown, the exec team in the church really is running the micro levels of it, and then the board itself is more on the oversight. The board passes the budget, but there's certain levels. So I think when you're in a smaller organisation, the boards play much larger diversion, not just in the macro but in the micro, helping you do that. But then as the organisation grows, and you get the organisation gets more complex, the budget gets more complex. You've got to have systems and precedents in the system to keep it on that level in the financial system, and then that finance team would take things. They would get the board to approve the budget, and then the budget sets for the year. But then anything out of that budget on a big level has to come back to the board. So, I think that's the evolution of an organisation or a non-for-profit on any level, and that's probably the same with a business as well, in a sense of at the beginning, everyone's on board, and then as you grow, you've got to specialise things, and our boards change over time as well, where they're more oversighting our church on a legal level, a property level, and a finance level. And the vision's really coming from the exec team and eldership. So that really varies between the structure of churches. And some churches would have that a really successful model on a board. The one person would be over certain things in the board right through there. So there's not one model that works for every. There's lots of models that all can be successful.
Cool. What do you see as the major hurdle moving forward for not-for-profits and for churches, multi-campus? What's the biggest hurdle at the moment? I know we've gone through, the Royal Commission just recently, and that brought a lot of changes. Is there a big hurdle coming up, or what do you see as in the coming months, years, as the biggest hurdles for NFPs?
I think the church. I can speak from my denomination, or the ACNC and other denominations. I think they've done very well at adapting to those things. And we've got to take the seriousness of, especially the Royal Commission and child protection and all those things that have been, the Safer Churches conversation has really changed right across the board. It's a good thing for everybody that we have processes and plans in place, and I think that's been great. But I think it's more just refining those and continually to make our church communities welcome, but they've got to be safe places, they've got to be well-managed places. Same with occupational health and safety, same with financial management. We've got to keep growing and becoming best practice. And the challenge is always that we're also volunteer organisations. And so the majority of work quite often done in a non-for-profit or a church is volunteers. And so we've got to continually make it, making sure we're doing best practice, but making sure it's friendly for volunteers to be connected. It's not too complicated, and we can still function as a community organisation.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that.
But I don't know there might be other challenges in the future. I don't know, but I think the biggest ones have been the area of compliance for safer churches, for child protection, for finance, and for occupational health and safety and legals has been a big transformation. I just think that will continue. That we have to work on that, and the balance of making it practical to work within the community, and also making sure we're fulfilling our legal obligations and our insurance obligations.
That's the hard balance. If there's one thing that you would give, one piece of advice to give to somebody listening or watching today that is just the how to start up an NFP, or you're getting in that growth stage, what's the one piece of advice? Like obviously you covered off the getting advice, that sort of thing. Would that be your biggest piece of advice? Just go out and get the advice you need.
Yeah, and then I think having connected mentors, don't isolate yourself, that continually are in a higher place. So one of the things that's been useful to us is we've had, for our church, board members outside our church. So they're coming not emotionally attached to the things going on, but they're just good board members that are having church experience, but they don't actually, so that's one strategy that we've done. But just having mentors and people to talk to and exposing yourself to new things and bigger things. I think that's the biggest thing. And I do think too, as churches, we're probably professionally, for our pastors and our admin team and all this stuff, and sometimes non-profits, because we're always tight on money, investing in training for people, whether it's, if you're doing bookkeeping, investing into that, investing into, training in the area of, working with youth and children, whatever it may be, we need to continually, I think, make more of an investment in that, and then just keep putting yourself in places where you can grow to learn. I know, there's master's courses people are doing in leadership. There's, on the job training. It doesn't have to always be formal. Like, I remember when I first really got into a place where I had to start running big budgets when I was Youth Alive, I didn't do any formal training. I just got some mentoring from some accountants to help me quickly upskill myself. I don't have to become an expert, but I need to have some level of basis knowledge to do that, you know.
Yeah.
I would say if you've got to decide to be a CEO or a senior pastor in the future, having some business and finance background and organizational management background is a great prerequisite, as well as theology and pastoral training.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, mate, we're out of time. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the episode today, and I really appreciate your time and your advice. Is there, if people want to get in contact with yourself or the church, do they any particular way to get in contact?
They can just email info@icchurch.com or just call their church office. So I think it's a 1300 number. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's definitely there.
No worries, mate. Thank you very much for your time today, mate. Really appreciate it.
God bless.